Hello everyone, I'm Aseem Jakhar, co-founder of Exploity, and today we are going to be talking about secure shell security issues. I have with me Rob King. He's the Director of Security Research at runZero. Rob, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So let's start with your latest security research on SSH.
On SSH, the secure shell. So SSH is the de facto administration protocol of the internet. It is everywhere. It's on every server. It's in Windows now. It's very, very common. And it's used for administering systems. It's used for secure file transfer. It's beautifully common. It's extremely well designed. It's a very secure protocol in protocol design terms. But what we've discovered is that not everyone is using it securely. And that's kind of interesting. We managed to find some vulnerabilities in how it's being used. It actually all started, there's been some pretty interesting SSH developments over the past year. Most famously might be the XZ vulnerability, which was a backdoor, a very evil but beautiful piece of work that was the result of years of social engineering to get some code into the XZ library that was then loaded into SSH daemons on systemd-based Linux systems, and it was great. It was caught at the last minute, read like a spy novel, super interesting. And so the founder of runZero, HD Moore, had this brilliant idea to take Gia Tan, which was the pseudonym of the attacker, and take the public key from GitHub that Gia had been using, and then try to scan every SSH server on the internet to see where that public key might be accepted. He actually patched the crypto library in Go to do half auth with SSH to see if the public key would work or not. And we scanned everywhere. We thought we found Gia Tan. It was super exciting. It turned out to all be false positives. We never actually found Gia Tan, sadly, but what we did find were tens of thousands of vulnerable devices that were not using SSH correctly. Shells were just kind of falling out of the sky. It was a very exciting weekend.
Nice. So, speaking of the backdoor, would you like to share your views on the recent SSH vulnerabilities, including regression?
Yep. So it's been a very interesting year for SSH. So that we had the XZ vulnerability, and then not to be outdone, we had regression. My favorite thing about regression was the fact that there's something called address space layout randomization, ASLR. And it's been in operating systems for years now, and it's always been sort of this academic thing, but it really saved the bacon with this. So what regression was a vulnerability in certain versions of OpenSSH. OpenSSH is actually designed really only to work on OpenBSD, but there's OpenSSH portable, and then it goes to other systems, and they get patches and do whatever. And so on some of these systems, there was an async signal handling bug that resulted in memory corruption due to a logging function. And if it hadn't been for ASLR, it would have been much more easily exploitable. But thanks to ASLR, it resulted in, it would have taken days or maybe even weeks to exploit. But it was a big deal. It was a true legitimate remote code execution bug, even if it is difficult to exploit. So that was interesting. There was another interesting vulnerability, and the research was done by, there was an excellent write-up from Watchtower Labs in the MoveIt product, and specifically the embedded SSH library that they used. So there's a lot of implementations of SSH that are designed to be put into other systems. There's one in Go, there's one in C#, there's a million of them. And the library was treating public keys, part of the public key, as a path name. So you could, and including UNC paths on Windows. So you could actually say, oh, okay, I want my public key starts with, / /, and you could actually connect to other things. And the Watchtower Labs folks did some really great work where they sort of threaded a needle into getting remote code execution by getting it to trust itself, by putting stuff in logs. It's a fascinating report, really, really interesting. So that kind of also led us to, wow, there's a lot more going on with SSH this year than maybe we thought. So we had a lot of fun just digging into the thousands of devices that we found. It was a super interesting weekend, like I said.
Yeah. It's funny because SSH, the primary purpose of SSH is security, right? Secure access. But even then you find, so many insecure implementation. So the vulnerable devices or the vulnerable systems that you found, what were the issues with those, or top 2 or top 5?
Oh, well, the top, I could give you the top 100. So what was funny, so there were several systems that were just buggy. It was interesting where sometimes they would accept every other key or every third key, which I thought was kind of weird. Some of them would just give you access. There was one particular embedded device that had an uninitialized variable. So if you had ever successfully SSH'd into it, you couldn't get into it again. But if it was the first time you'd SSH'd into it since it had been powered on, it would just accept anything. So you could just SSH in and you were it. My favorite, or one of my favorites, and one of the more interesting ones, is this. There's a lot of systems out there that do host authentication. So you SSH in and it accepts none auth, and you can just SSH in and you get in, and then it presents a secondary login prompt that's actually running inside. It's not the shell, it's another program, and it'll prompt for a username and prompt for a password. And some of those are, so the post-authentication attack surface of OpenSSH is much, much larger, because now it's assuming you're in, right? You can now do potentially TCP forwarding or send signals or do all these things. And so for some of these shells, you can send a signal and kill that process, and it just drops you to a shell. It was great. Or one will, you SSH in, and it then starts a telnet session and telnets back to itself, and then you can just send the telnet escape sequence, and it drops you to a shell. There was a wireless access point that the password prompt didn't quote shell meta characters, and it was passing it through a shell function, so you could just type, backticks or a dollar parent and in the password field and just get arbitrary code execution that way. And then so that was obviously a lot of fun. We also found, so there's been a renaissance in code forges, hosting your own code forges, which is great. I love that. I love writing code. And these systems will often have embedded SSH servers. And so these embedded SSH libraries, tend to leave it up to the client, the people writing the code, to use it securely. And so they'll accept, for example, arbitrary environment variables. And so we had one system that we found where it was a system called SoftServe, and it used an embedded SSH library, and it would accept any environment variable and then set that in the environment of the Git process when it would invoke the Git binary. And so you could set things like LD preload to load, shellcode, and then you could check in shellcode to your Git repository and say, LD preload whatever, and then you just got a shell. It was a lot of fun, and they were very nice people to work with. We disclosed that very responsibly, and they gave us a CVE, and we're super cool. But that was always fun it's always fun to try something, and then it just kind of pops up, and then you see a shell prompt, and you're like, did it, It's bad, but I did it. Lots of fun.
So, do you have any advice for developers or enterprises who use SSH for file transfer, for development, for whatever, like specific best practices, like do this, don't do this, do this?
So my favorite, the easiest piece of advice I can think of is always use public key authentication. Don't use passwords. A lot of systems, we actually at runZero, we published a research report earlier this year where we go really in depth on this. We found tens of thousands of systems that, yes, they use public key authentication, which is great, but they still have passwords enabled, which is bad, because password authentication is subject to password guessing, it's subject to brute force attacks, things like that. So use public keys if you can. Even better, and obviously also if you can use multi-factor authentication, even better. And then there's also the sort of the gold standard and simultaneously the hidden gem of SSH is the certificate-based authentication. So you can actually have centrally managed keys, centrally managed certificates, and you can sign keys. And that makes it so much easier to revoke things, to keep an idea of what keys are valid. So keep track of that. OpenSSH especially has an immense number of tuning knobs that you can set. And a lot of people don't realize the sheer amount of configurability that's available. Recently, for example, OpenSSH added a per source penalties directive that says, okay, if I see certain behavior from certain sources, and that can be an IP address or a network, don't let them connect anymore, or slow them down, or don't let them do certain things. So definitely look into that if you can. There's also one of my favorite things, and I love doing this because you can get very, very fine-grained. A lot of systems will let you specify very specific permissions on keys, what this key can do. This key can allocate a pseudo terminal. This key can't. This key can only be used to execute this command, things like that. So set that. Make sure you're not allowing users to set arbitrary environment variables. I mean, if they're SSHing in and getting a normal shell and they're supposed to be on the box as a shell, there's not much you can do, right? They can SSH again, that's great. But if they're designed to be used for one specific thing, you can say, okay, this key can really only be used for that one specific thing. So read the manuals and turn all the knobs is my advice. And use public keys and not passwords.
All right. So I take it as public keys, certificates, don't use passwords.
Don't use passwords.
Either of these options. Permissions on keys is to, if you have a specific purpose on the server, then limit it to a specific purpose itself.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that's good enough.
Oh, excellent. I'm glad I could give good advice.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We were speaking with Rob King from runZero on SSH vulnerabilities. This is Aseem Jakhar signing off.